Let's play a quick game of Player A versus Player B. Player A averages 19 points, 10 assists to just 2.3 turnovers, 4.3 rebounds, 2.3 steals with a 58.7% true shooting percentage. Player B averages 19.4 points, 11 assists to 2.7 turnovers, 4.6 rebounds, 1.9 steals with a 58.9% true shooting percentage. I think we could all agree that those numbers are fairly similar. There's a couple of small differences, but you could see the same player putting up both stat lines, right? Well, Player A is Chris Paul from his first All-Star season to his last year with the Clippers. Player B is the most underrated player in the league, in my opinion, Tyrese Haliburton. Before I continue on with this video, if you haven't been enjoying it, drop a like. Also, subscribe for daily uploads in December. Now, before everybody freaks out, calm down, everyone. I'm not directly comparing Tyrese Haliburton to Chris Paul, even though the intro is pretty directly comparing him to Chris Paul. But I don't actually mean that necessarily. First of all, the differences are significant enough on defense, as well as really both of how they approach the scoring. I just don't think it's a necessarily fair comparison. Not to mention Tyrese has a bunch of physical advantages that Chris Paul didn't while putting up similar numbers. And when comparing between time periods, pace comes into play as well. For that entire stretch of Chris Paul's career, the average pace was 93 in the league. It is currently 99 in the NBA today, so it's not exactly one-to-one numbers either. That pace difference is not massive, but it's enough that Tyrese definitely would come out with a little bit worse numbers. The comparison is not one-to-one by any means. The point I'm trying to make is not that Haliburton is the next Chris Paul, rather that these numbers Tyrese is putting up is putting him on an all-time great trajectory. As much as people love to clown on Chris Paul, he is one of the best point guards the game has ever seen, one of the most complete players the game has ever seen, one of the best players, period, the game has ever seen. And Tyrese Haliburton, in really his first year being fully unleashed, is putting up prime Chris Paul numbers. The number one thing that gave me the thought to begin with to even compare Chris Paul to Tyrese Haliburton has to be the assist to turnover ratio similarity. Chris Paul is the best assist to turnover ratio player of all time. Looking back at that peak average, he put up 10 assists per game with just 2.3 turnovers a night. That's a ratio of 4.34 assists to every turnover. Averaging that over a decade is just absurd. Meanwhile, those numbers are being compared to Tyrese Haliburton's 23 games this year. So again, it's not a one-to-one comparison. I look forward to the comments suggesting otherwise anyways, because that's how this job works. But through those 23 games, Haliburton is averaging 11 assists to 2.7 turnovers, which is a ratio of 4.07 assists to every turnover, which is not that far behind. Hallie, similar to CP3, is capable of getting super high assist numbers and leading the league in assists, while also not being a turnover machine by any stretch. In fact, to point out the craziness with his assist to turnover ratio, I feel the need to mention that at the end of November, he had a 3-game stretch where Haliburton averaged 13.3 assists per game, and he did not get a single turnover. That's pretty nuts. Another way to highlight just how crazy his playmaking has been is to compare his numbers against his peers. If we take a look at the top 10 players in assists per game, Hallie is second in turnovers to Marcus Smart, who averages 0.4 less, but he also averages 3.5 less assists. But everyone else in the top 10 is averaging more turnovers while averaging less assists. Trey is second in assists, averaging 0.8 more turnovers with 1.5 less assists. Jokic is averaging 2.1 less assists with 0.7 more turnovers. Luka is averaging 2.3 less assists with 1 more turnover, and Ja Morant is averaging 3.4 less assists with 1.1 more turnovers. So the point that I am getting at is Tyrese Haliburton is one of the best passers in the entire NBA, currently just statistically the best one if you're just going purely off assist to turnover, and he's doing this at the age of 22. The guy is a generational passing prospect. Just straight up is. He already is a generational playmaker, and he's this young. Being #1 in assists, but 28th in turnovers is just insanity. But now that we've established his playmaking prowess, let's talk about how Haliburton scores the ball, which is actually very important to the playmaking in and of itself. One of Haliburton's best skills is leveraging the threat he presents as a scorer to open up opportunities for his teammates. Now let's talk about the jump shot first. A lot of people were concerned about his jump shot going to the draft because he definitely has an unconventional shooting form. However, that has not manifested in bad shooting in the slightest. Hallie is currently taking 7 threes a game while shooting 38%, while taking nearly 60% of those threes off of the dribble. This puts him on the cusp of being an elite three-point shooter, and I'm quite confident that he can hold this up because he shot 41% from 3 on 5 attempts in all the games he's played in the league prior to this season. So we're talking about Tyrese being a generational playmaker, and then he also brings a whole other skill set where he is basically elite. If we talk about the mid-range area, he is taking a little less than a quarter of his shots from there, and his percentages have been inconsistent, but for his career, he is shooting 47% from in between. Once again, pushing him into an elite conversation. I think his volume needs to be bumped up a little bit more, and I need to see his consistency from mid-range get there before I'm gonna call him an elite mid-range shooter, but he's definitely shown flashes of that being well possible. Now, where Haliburton has taken his biggest leap individually as a scorer this year has been in the finishing department. He is taking a career-high percentage of his shots at the basket and finishing at a career-high best of 74%, which is pretty dang good for a guard. Haliburton has a real knack for hitting touch shots, short floaters, finger rolls, and he's able to do it with all kinds of different angles. If you watch him in the pick and roll and he goes for like a floater type shot or like a scoop shot or whatever, he knows how to do it from like off of the left foot, off of the right foot, with his body turned at a weird angle. He just has a natural knack for finding the rim. Pause, I think. The one major area where I would definitely be critical of Tyrese Haliburton's scoring options is that he's not really good at getting to the free throw line. While I mention and praise his ability to get touch shots off, very often players who are known for these touch shots are also known for doing so to avoid contact, and Tyrese Haliburton is no exception. He very often shies away from the idea of just going up strong and dealing with the fact that a big body is going to slam into him. And yeah, that kind of sucks, but it also results in free throw attempts, and it also results in the defense having to play you honestly. So that's the big thing for him. If Tyrese Haliburton wants to become an elite scorer rather than just a pretty good one, he's gonna have to learn to embrace contact. Even if Tyrese shot, let's just say, 7 free throws a game instead of the like 3.5 that he is right now. So he just doubles his free throw attempts. As soon as he does that, he would go from 19 points a game to nearly 23. Just by getting to the line that little bit more. But to get back into some more praise, really the area where Haliburton's scoring stands out the most is, as I mentioned earlier, in the pick and roll, because my lord does he know how to leverage his scoring ability into creating opportunities for his teammates. When Hallie is running a pick and roll, you'll notice the teams really have no choice but to not play for the pass, because Tyrese is so efficient from pretty much everyone on the floor that playing drop coverage and trying to cut off a passing lane will result in a floater or a pull-up jumper that's more than likely than not to go in. You know, maybe I am comparing him to Chris Paul, because that sounds very similar to the exact issues with defending Chris Paul on the pick and roll, but I digress. Tyrese's scoring gravity is just good enough to make his job as a playmaker even easier. I don't know that he's quite an elite scorer or that he ever will be an elite one, but he's definitely on the cusp. And there's plenty of room to grow because Tyrese is just 22 years old. And I know this off of the top of my head, and I forever will, because me and Tyrese Haliburton were born on the same exact day. which means that, yes, he is 22 because so am I. Shut up. Anyways, Halliburton is really, really, really good. And I think because of him being on the Pacers, not enough people are paying attention. And despite not having all of that special of a roster around him, it's definitely a good one, but nothing crazy. He has managed to keep the Pacers as a competitive team, pretty much single-handedly orchestrating their offense. Imagine what the dude would be able to do with actually really talented players around him. Anyways, shout out to Rudy for editing this video, and goodbye.